Hello, I'm Lena, and this is Karma, my new podcast. The theme for Karma is sustainability. So, in my episodes, I will speak with sustainable companies, environmental organizations, and influencers, just to give you an insight about the current movement. Today is my first episode, and I'm very happy to welcome Gabi from iClima Earth.
How did I get here again?
Record? Yeah. So, hi, Gabi. Welcome to my podcast.
Hi, Lena. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, could you please introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. My name is Gabriela Herculano. Everybody calls me Gabi. I am CEO and co-founder of London-based Green FinTech iClima Earth. Grew up in Brazil. Portuguese and Brazilian. I spent quite a few years in the US where I got my MBA in finance from the Wharton School. My background is in private equity. And we started iClima Earth around 2 years ago. And I bring that background in long-term infrastructure investments to iClima because we really felt compelled to redefine climate change investments. And I think that the approach, the very long-term investment approach that my co-founder and I had, we worked together at GE Capital for many years, that we bring to iClima serves us very well.
Okay. Could you go a little bit into what is iClima Earth and what are you doing there?
We, like I mentioned, we're trying to redefine climate change investments, and we see ourselves as a green fintech. What does that mean? It means the use of data and technology. So we have spent almost 2 years collecting information on the companies that we think can decarbonize the planet. What do we mean by that? Companies that can preclude emissions from ever taking place. So we have solutions, and that goes way beyond renewable energy, that allows us to fulfill our needs as a society for electricity, for food, for communication, for transportation in a much lower emission way. And that delta is what's called potential avoided emissions, what does not get emitted in the first place. And that's exactly what we look for. So we look for the companies, listed companies, because that's in line with the products that we do, that are climate change solutions. They bring to market these technologies that are ready to be scaled up. And we get the data to create equity benchmarks. That's how we monetize our IP. We create equity benchmarks. They are published and managed by German player Selective. And what we then did was we vertically integrated. We launched our own ETFs that track our own equity benchmarks.
Okay, wow, that sounds impressive. So what then makes iClima Earth then unique, just to be clear for our audience? Compared to others, I mean.
The whole industry is a great question. We love that question. The whole industry, and for that I'm referring more in terms of exchange traded funds that are very liquid and listed on securities. The whole industry is very much looking backwards. They're looking for the companies that reduced their own emissions. They're looking backwards, number one. Number two, they are looking and representing the companies that are doing less harm. Rightly so. Great corporate citizens, Google, Amazon, Microsoft is usually the top constituents of these funds. They are reducing what's called scope 2 emissions, indirect emissions from energy sources, most and foremost. Rightly so, but there's a limit to the impact from decarbonization if that decarbonization is a cost line item, which is what happens for Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, for example. So that's a second thing. And a third thing is that in many instances, these funds are representing companies that score really high according to a specific ESG scorecard. We don't do any of that. We have forward-looking, tangible metrics. That potential avoided emissions, we look at the units of different solutions that are being sold in the next year. And that's how we estimate forward-looking potential avoided emissions. And that, because we can forecast revenue for companies, allows us to forecast potential avoided emissions all the way to 2030, which is our horizon. So that really sets us apart. The use of tangible metrics that are forward-looking, unlike the backward-looking companies doing less harm. The second thing is that we look at the solutions. We look at innovation. So we look at the shovel makers, the companies that can really mitigate climate change. So we're not telling the story of doing less harm. We're telling the story of this transformative, very impactful. It's a very different story when decarbonization for you drives your revenue, not your cost line item, but your revenue. That's your DNA. That's what you do as a company. Think of course, Tesla, right? So that's the second thing. And the third point, while the industry does look at ESG scorecards, we do not. We do have a holistic approach, but we have the tangible E metrics. Green revenue, brown revenue, potential avoided emissions are critical to our methodology. But then we incorporate S and G. I'm referring to environmental, social, and governance, the ESG key metrics, but as raw data, clear indicators, not scorecard. So that really it's what we really believe sets us apart.
Yes. So you said it before. You really you analyzed a lot of companies and find data to find the companies that are within your criteria to fit this. And then how you go to the company and say, would you like to be a part of, or you just do you have, no?
It's a great question. Companies are publicly traded. So
yes, I did traded. Yeah, okay, you're right. Yeah.
So we developed our methodology. We have our vetting process. Yes. What you do helps the planet get to net zero, yes or no? And then we have a very pictorial description of the steps that we go through to vet the companies.
Yes.
Do you contamination? Do you have a part of the business that is very much tied to the legacy fossil fuel? If you cross the line, it's called negative screening, we will not incorporate. So I can give you lots of examples. Employer GE, we negatively screen GE. GE has beautiful wind turbine solutions, but it has a lot of diesel locomotives and engines for airplanes, and a lot of oil and gas legacy solutions. So we negatively screen. Another company, for example, is LG Chem. It's fundamentally a petrochemical company, has beautiful solutions on the battery side, but it's all under the same umbrella when we don't want that contamination. So we go through that, and based on public information, these companies are listed, so they have an obligation to report annual reports, quarterly reports on the finance side, and then many of them are now reporting more information on the sustainability side. So their sustainability reports has been a great source of data for us. So that data as of now has not been mandatory, and it's something that is going, Lina, to change everything in as we go forward. IFRS is one of the most positive outcomes in our view of COP26. Is going to be making disclosures, climate-related disclosures, mandatory. So we're going to have much more data and much more information. So we create these equity benchmarks based on the information that is public and that we get from the companies.
Okay. And just, to be clear, who can invest? Everybody, or?
Everybody.
Everybody.
That's the beauty of an ETF. Yeah. So we like ETFs.
That's right. Yeah.
And one of that is that it's so democratic. It's listed. We price them at a very low entry point. So we're talking, €8, 10 to 8 euros, that kind of range. So with that, you buy one share of a portfolio that represents 160 in case of our flagship fund, the Decarbonization Enablers Fund, or the Smart Energy Fund, which is a little bit over 50, and you get that portfolio, a comprehensive set of solutions.
Yes. So the iClima Smart Energy Fund is the newest one, or it was the second one? Yes.
That's right. So that's in doing research on the solutions that decarbonize the planet, we were really impressed with the growth trend of what is called behind the meter. In other words, the local solar. We have never been able to produce electricity at the point of consumption, but now we can, because the two key technologies that are converging, the batteries and the solar panels, change everything. So what is it that we mean by smart energy? Smart energy for us is defined as energy that is digital, it is decentralized, and of course it decarbonizes because it's renewable based. So that is all the electricity that gets produced at the point of consumption and then gets stored in a battery and gets traded and managed by the 5G and the Internet of Things. So think of, for example, demand management. We've never been able to bring this to another level where you go do a load of laundry and your gadget tells you, this is really not the time because it's the peak hours. Do this at another time. This is called demand management. And then if you get compensated financially for shifting your load, that is better for the grid. You don't have to burn fossil fuel for the peaking facilities, the facilities that you can add to the system, natural gas or coal, or even in worst case, diesel, very quickly when everybody is consuming electricity at the same time. So that's the beauty of that smart energy, and it's growing tremendously fast. And we see a lot of research being done. For example, the EU Parliament, they forecast and expect that in a couple of decades, most of us in Europe will be prosumers, will be producers and consumers. Our houses and buildings will have at different levels, but we will have ability to produce part of our electricity needs, and that really changes everything.
Yes, I mean, it's really good. I think these to focus more on the firms that really help our planet. But I'm really interested in what was your personal motivation to found iClimate Earth. I mean, with your other co-founders.
We have this big sense of urgency, and we think it's the decarbonization story was not being told the way we think it's really impactful. So looking backwards, we understand it comes from Paris Agreement, when one of the key milestones was to make companies accountable so that they would reduce their own emissions. We're running out of time. We have no time to waste. We need to be precise. It's like going on a diet. You cannot just, I'm going to eat a little bit less. I'm going to be a little bit more active. And then, something good will come out of that. Well, that's not good enough, right? We need to cut our emissions by 2030 by half. How are we to do that? We felt very strongly that we were missing a very clear numerator for that denominator. So we can quantify, the science is so clear. We need to cut our emissions by about 7.6%. We are not giving up on the 1.5 degree target yet. So if we reduce that emissions by 7.6%, we are nowhere near that. But we can be doing that. But where is that avoidance going to come from? How are we to quantify? So we're emitting 54 gigatons per year. That 7.6 is about 4.21 gigatons. Where is that coming from? If we don't have a tangible metric to quantify and say, are we adding enough electric vehicles? Are we adding enough plant-based burgers? Are we doing enough of telepresence? Are we recycling enough? And therefore burning much less fossil fuel? We do not have a way to quantify that. So that was one of our main motivations, Lina. And I think that we do believe, we're finance people. We do believe that capital markets can be a source of good. So we wanted to tell that story of the tangible, precise decarbonization story, bringing from the finance world all these, key metrics and representing that within funds. You can be very impactful in the way you allocate your capital. And that capital translates into growth, capital for companies that are, with real solutions. So we think we're going to be very impactful in many different ways. It's not just about the performance of the funds or the asset under management of the funds. It is about that potential avoided emissions and the use of potential avoided emissions as a metric. And that we have this idea of the same way we talk about time value of money in finance, a dollar that you generate in a few years down the line are not worth the same as the dollar that you generate this year you have in your balance sheet now. is the same with time value of carbon. The carbon that does not get burned or emitted a few years later, it's not as impactful as the carbon that does not get emitted now. So how can we avoid emissions right now? Same to return on investment, which is a very big concept in finance. Well, is return on carbon. People talk about, for example, carbon capture sequestration. Chevron in Australia publicly came out this week saying that their billions deployed into that carbon capture sequestration is not working. So then you do that calculation of what would have been sequestered by that facility, and the $3 billion that they deployed towards that, and you immediately realize that return on carbon is very, very low. We need to be much more efficient in the way that we deploy this 3.2 trillion, which is the minimum that we have to invest every year to meet that climate change mitigation Paris Agreement 1.5 degree target. We need to do better. And we really felt like we were developing a methodology that could be very, very impactful. That was our biggest motivation.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. So I mean, the end 2021, it's going to the end soon. So is there something special planned, or can you give us a preview for the 2022? What's going on? I mean, last year it was COP 26 at the end. If I remembered correctly, you were also a part of it, or you spoke there? Yes.
I did. We presented at COP 26.
Yes.
Presented the UNFCCC exactly that of potential avoided emissions. They were so keen to see that data. We think 2022 is the year where we will see the acceleration. We are confident. We invested about 632 billion in 2020. That's definitely not enough. That order of magnitude for us to be still in line with the 1.5 degrees is at least 3.2 trillion. And we do believe that 2022 is the year where we will see that big jump in terms of level of investments for mitigation, most and foremost. So that is something that is interesting. We also think 2022 is the end of the beginning, and it's the beginning of the end. So what do we mean by that? Is the end of the beginning for many of the solutions. Solar rooftop on residential solar rooftop, for example, vehicles to grid or virtual power plants. These are solutions that were seen as concepts. They were seen as new solutions that needed to prove that they could be scaled up and go through that massive adoption. It's the end of the beginning. We're past the point where we have to prove that this could work. Tesla has proven that electric vehicles are beautiful, and they are high user experience, and they're deflationary. The prices keep coming down because the key technology, the battery, keeps coming down. So that's the end of the beginning. Right now, these solutions, the green solutions, are starting to see that really fast adoption curve. Electric vehicles is a case in point. We do believe that Tesla itself sold 500,000 electric vehicles in 2020. Our forecast is that they will indeed sell 20 by 2030. So that's the end of the beginning, but the beginning of the end is the beginning of the end for fossil fuel. For example, the iconic Harley Davidson in the US, the very loud internal combustion engine motorcycles, they have announced that they are going to be splitting the company. The electric vehicles will be spun off, and they will list that company. Why is that? We expect to see a lot of incumbent players that have these products that are so tied to fossil fuel and associated with fossil fuel. They will acknowledge that this is the end of the beginning. You either do something and you split your business and you prove to the market that you have a green story that is going to grow very well, and that you're not going to allow that contamination, or you're going to be severely penalized, and you're going to have to disclose that data. So if you are one of the very large incumbent, it used to be called the Seven Sisters, the oil companies, well, you have to show how much of your capex is going towards the green solutions, the relevant solutions. So that's what we think is going to happen in 2022. investors will start to make that distinction. They will vote with that allocation. They will scrutinize the companies much more. So it will also mark the beginning of the end for many of these fossil fuel names. They will really have to now not just talk about becoming net zero, but show how they are doing that.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, to get a little bit more into your office or private sector, I'm interested in what at your office or in private you're doing to be like more sustainable.
That is a great question. That is a great question. We do look at our carbon footprint ourselves, and I have to say, most of our analysts are young. They're in their 20s, and they walk the walk and they talk the talk. They're very concerned about not using plastic water bottles and the way that they commute to come to the office. We have now in London to go back to working from home all the time, but we're constantly looking through our own operations and what it is that we can do to be as green as we can. And one of the most impactful things that we can do is that communication. So we're putting together our very first sustainability report, where we're talking about the metrics that we think are very relevant for the other companies, and it applies to us as well. We have a lot of debates internally on offsets. This idea that you can continue to operate the way you do, and that you just offset emissions and try to be carbon neutral that way, is something we're critical of. The fundamental path to carbon neutrality is by operating in a different way, in a way that is much more sustainable. It is not to keep the business as usual and just offset out of it. So we look at the technology that we use a lot of Zoom. Ourselves, the company in our universe, telepresence is a very relevant solution. So we look, DocuSign is a company in our universe as well, the solution that we also use at a company level. So we're constantly looking through that, the way that we can move away from business as usual.
Yeah. Okay. So how many employees do you have in London? Or how many people are working for you there?
We are a team of 8, and we have our first analysts and interns all came from Imperial College. Imperial College London has an incredible talent pool, and now the 2 newest team members all come from Oxford. So we have this incredible talent pool. Imperial College in particular has a master's degree in climate change, finance and management. Their strong view is that we're past the point where you can teach sustainability on one side and teach finance and management on the other side. It has to be holistic. You have to put the two together, and we found incredible talent at Imperial. We're having a few more conversations, interviewing a few more analysts, coincidentally from the same 2 schools, but that's also because our analysts they love what they're doing, which is something that really motivates us. They really want to do that impact, and they have this interest in investing and interesting in impact, and the role, there are different roles within iClima are very much in line with that. So we keep just coincidentally having some of their colleagues showing interest in what we're doing, so we're interviewing for a few more positions, and that's and I've had quite a few conversations with people from the city or from the UK government, where they ask us, do you think you would have been able to create this company and grow this fast if you were not London based? I don't think so. I think part of our success has to do with the fact that we're based in London. There's a whole ecosystem that supports ventures like ours that are merging finance and green, and we have received tremendous support and benefit from being, at the heart of that green city, if you will.
Yes. Do you have any tips for my audience, maybe? what people can do to be more sustainable? And
On the investment
invest,
side,
of course, in in your ETFs.
yes,
Maybe
well,
is
no,
one thing.
not just that. We do believe, of course, that the two funds that we put together are truly unique and really beautiful, and telling
Yeah.
very exciting stories, and with companies that are really innovating. But the biggest thing that we talk about with investors, big or small, is that you have to look through. You have to be super methodical and systematic about analyzing this. What is the purpose of the fund? What is the story that you're telling? What are your tangible metrics? What is the source of your impact? Do you negative screen? What are the rules that you have in place? Be very transparent, demand that from whatever fund that you buy, and look through. And that's how we will avoid and combat greenwashing with data. And the more investors that say, look, I don't like this fund, seems like a lot of greenwashing, the better, the faster that we will move towards financial products that really make sense. I think that we all need to do that. There's a lot of greenwashing out there. There's a lot of products with beautiful names, and you think that they would be very relevant companies. And I always go through that myself, and I find companies with of a fund, for example, with 9,000 is an Article 9 fund. Is supposed to be one of the funds with very high environmental benefits, but it has 9,000 megawatts of coal-fired power plants. That shouldn't happen anymore. iShares launched in April earlier this year the Climate Change Readiness Fund, and it had Chevron, Exxon, Marathon Oil. What do you mean by that? Right. So we need to, all of us as investors, be very diligent and very demanding, and not accept greenwashing.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, I think then we are now at the end. Then thank you very much, Gabi, for your time. And really impressive information, what you're doing.
Thank you so much. No, we really appreciate the opportunity. Germany is a big market for us. Whenever I go speak to investors in Germany, I always come back, really motivated, because you're taking ESG to another level, and you've been leaders in the space, and I really appreciate the opportunity to, through you, get closer to that. To that market.
Okay, thank you.
How did I get here again?